It feels like as soon as you become a parent, you enter some sort of race. A race where you're always on the run, where you're always comparing your kid with everyone else's. It begins in very small and subtle ways. Your kid is weighed and measured against their percentiles, right? Like how tall are they? How much do they weigh? Every kid has these curves that they're put on. And I think this is quite damaging. But I think this also continues on further along. Where we compare our kids based on what schools they go to, what grades they're getting. Are they getting better grades than someone else or less grades? Are they getting into their most exclusive summer camps, or are they going to all the exclusive programs at the right universities? It seems that as soon as your kids are born, we enter this race, and then we drag our kids along into this race, and we create this very competitive mindset right from the get-go, that you always have to be chasing, you always have to be competing with someone else or another, and it's a very chaotic and hectic existence. Over the last couple of months, what I've actually learned is that the exact opposite approach is so much more conducive towards a better childhood and better growth. I've read tons of books, papers, articles, and so on and so forth to help me understand what it actually takes to raise great kids. And in this video, I want to talk to you about some of those insights that I've learned. Now, there is a multi-billion-dollar industry when it comes to things like toys, enrichment toys that are meant to make your kids geniuses. There's a whole industry of appliances, of apps on your phone, of music tracks and devices that are meant to help your kids sleep better and feed better and eat better and teach them all these new skills before they're even 3 years old. They're meant to become super babies. And I think it's such a toxic way of looking at it. There's just so much information out there. People are just thrown so much information that as a new parent, it's extremely overwhelming. There's too much information being thrown at you, and it's hard to process and digest all of it. And looking at all the books that are out there, it almost seems like you need a degree in parenting in order to raise a good parent. Well, it turns out that that's not actually the case, right? If you look at the actual evidence out there, parenting is meant to be a lot simpler and easier. We've been doing it for millions of years. It's not meant to be that complicated. And kids are incredible, resilient, smart, brilliant creatures who love, they bond, they learn, they are incredible beings, and we need to give them a lot more credit. And so I know there are a lot of enrichment programs out there that say that, well, kids are capable. And by the way, here's a million things you can throw at them. And I think this is such an interesting and counterintuitive way of downplaying their capability. If we truly believe that our kids are capable, we would be entrusting them with a lot more play. We would be entrusting them to use a lot more of their imagination. I understand that in many cases, it's important to understand and measure where your kid is at. Especially right after they're born, you don't want your kids to lose too much weight. You don't want your kids to be shrinking. You don't want a lot of these health conditions. So certainly in those cases, it makes a lot of sense to aim for a good baseline to make sure your kids are healthy, they're safe. Those things make a lot of sense. I think it's everything that happens after that, which I find to be so destructive to parenting and to childhood as well. And I want to get into some of those reasons today. I think more broadly speaking, there is something quite toxic about putting our kids and viewing them from a competitive lens. I don't know about you, but I want my kid to be a creative, someone who's out there and creates her own opportunities, who goes out there and makes what she wants out of her own mind. Unfortunately, what we're doing by instilling this type of competition in our kids from a young age based on their height, their weight, their IQ, the enrichment activities that they're doing, always putting them on this treadmill is that, you need to compete to win in life. And if you think about it, that's a very employee mindset. A lot of us want our kids to be leaders. We want them to be creatives. We want them to be startup entrepreneurs, those sorts of things. But we take away their agency when we put them in this competitive plane and we tell them, well, you always need to be chasing. Chase this, chase that. And if you do that, eventually you'll become this person, this super what? Super employee, someone who's always been chasing an external goal given to them by someone else. And so I think we need to relax a lot more, chill out, and come to terms with the fact that our kids are incredibly capable people, and they will learn and they will grow in the ways that they want to learn and grow, but they're going to be just fine. And as parents, we just need to relax. What's your experience been like? Maybe reflect back on your time of being compared to other people. What experience was that like for you? I bet it didn't feel that good. Now, try and think about what that anxiety, what even that unset expectation does to your kid when you're trying to sort of quote unquote push them towards a certain milestone, when you're trying to get them to win a certain race that they don't even know exists out there. As parents, we need to challenge this paradigm of the rat race. If we ourselves are thinking that we're in this rat race, we're going to pass that on to our kid. Childhood is a time where we need to stop thinking about the rat race. In fact, I think in our entire life, and when I think of my kid, I don't ever want her to be in a rat race. I don't ever want her to compete with other people. I want her to create the things that she wants to create because it was her decision and her intention to go out there and do it. I think more than anything, if you're a new parent, what I've learned is that we need to slow down a lot more and enjoy the journey a lot more. My kid is 6 months old, and I'm starting to slow down a lot more. I'm starting to take those few moments that I have, the diapering time, the feeding time, and really being fully present with the kid, with my daughter, because she's using the time to look into my eyes. We're developing a beautiful relationship together. And afterwards, after I put her down, she's off to play and she's exploring, she's rattling things out, and she's growing in remarkable ways. And when I sit back and I just observe her, I see that she is remarkable. She's smart. She is brilliant. And I know that she's going to be just fine. And she picks up on my energy. I remember back in the day when I was a lot more panicked, I was like, well, what am I going to do? How do I keep her engaged and distracted and entertained throughout the day? That panic, that low-level anxiety would rub off on her, and she herself would get quote-unquote bored a lot more easily because she was being completely distracted. So, one of the things that people talk about is that I want my kid to develop a great attention span. I want my kid to have great focus in this age of distraction. Well, when we interrupt them every couple of minutes and we rattle another toy in front of them, we pick them up, and as when they're engrossed in some little activity and we take them do something else, we are cutting off their ability to focus and build their attention muscle. And so what I'm learning is to just let her be. And when it's time for us time, feeding, diapering, putting her to sleep, when we're sort of walking together, spending time in nature, that's when we're building our relationship. And she is so much more responsive. She's so much more joyous in that way. Kids are individuals in and of themselves. From the time that they're infants, from the time that they're just a few days old, from the time that they're born, from the time that they're conceived, they're just individuals. They have their own personalities. They have their own unique characteristics, and they're here to respond and react to us. Quite often as a new parent, all you want to do is get through stuff, right? We want to distract them. We want to push them away. It's time to change a diaper. It's time to feed them. We're playing all these sorts of games, and we're sort of feeling like clowns. We're sort of feeling like court jesters, that we need to keep them entertained, engaged, distracted to get through these tasks. Let's get the diapering done, and let's get this done. Let's get that done. Let's do this development activity. Let's get this done. And it's so destructive. What the research actually seems to say is that the number one way for your kids to develop is if they have a great relationship, if they feel that they're safe, that they are loved, that they feel cared for, they feel respected. If they learn all these sorts of things, if they have the environment for these sorts of things, that's when they can grow and develop in the most confident way possible. Unfortunately, when we treat them as objects to let's get the feeding done to the baby, we take away that agency. We stop seeing them from the lens of capability. We stop seeing them from the lens of an individual. We see them as just a thing that we have to take care of, like a blob that's sort of out there. But if we start to pause and really enjoy those small moments of things like changing the diaper, feeding them, helping them put to sleep in the beginning, and training, or rather not training them, but to help them learn how to sleep by themselves, they will surprise you by cooperating with you. They will use those small moments to nurture that relationship between you and them. And then they'll be completely recharged to go out there and play by themselves, to play independently and grow and develop in some incredible, incredible ways. And so we need to do a lot less of rushing around. We need to see them more as individuals, and we need to trust that they're going to grow and develop in their own unique ways. And what I've found is when I look at my own daughter, is when I observe her, when I treat her like a real human being, and I observe the play that she's doing, I find someone who's doing all these sorts of exercises that I would never have expected to do. She is actively, individually building up the exact skill sets that she needs to meet all of her quote-unquote milestones. But she's doing it organically. She doesn't need an app. She doesn't need these enrichment toys. She doesn't need any of those sorts of things to be able to do that. All she needs is the time and space to play and be by herself. And the toys that we're giving her are very, very simple. They're not fancy toys. They're just simple wooden toys, simple cotton things that she can play with, use her imagination, and actively grow with them. I think there's an interesting saying that says that the more active your toys are, the less active your kids are. And so if you give your kids these whiz-bang sorts of toys that make sounds and noises and music, certainly it'll distract them, it'll keep them sort of quote-unquote engaged, but actually they're just being entertained, but it's going to turn off their ability to use their own imagination, their own engagement, to interact with that toy, manipulate it in whatever different ways that they need to, and actually grow with that toy. Less is a lot more, right? One of the first toys that we gave our kid was actually just a napkin, a handkerchief with patterns, which was completely safe. It was a cotton piece of thing that she could crumble up, she could see different patterns, she could sort of wave it around, and we could wave it around, and that was enough. That's all we needed. That's all she needed, and she could entertain herself for a long time with just that. If we look at the activities that she's doing even right now, she's doing all the exercises and that she needs to meet her milestones. So, it's quite remarkable the kinds of things that we would need to pay a specialist to teach us. Do this exercise, do that exercise. She is doing herself just for the act of play. And I think we need to do a lot more of that. We need to trust our kids a lot more because we've been doing this for millions of years. We don't need someone to instill fear in us. We don't need to look at these percentiles and graphs and charts that tell us our kid is falling behind. Because that is very distressing for a parent to know that your kid is falling behind. Our kids need time and space to be kids. Our kids need time and space to grow themselves individually. In fact, the work of Dr. Pikler says that when we try and force our kids to sit up straight when they aren't quite ready, you can see it right on their faces, right? They're kind of hunched over, they don't look all that happy. And we take photos of that and we think that's hilarious. But actually, we might even artificially help them meet that quote-unquote milestone of sitting upright, but they develop a lot of issues on their back. They can't sit up, they can't walk straight, they injure themselves a lot more. There are all these sorts of issues that happen downstream that you don't necessarily see right now when you sort of help them quote-unquote meet their milestone of helping them sit up straight. And that, I think, is what's so destructive. We hit the now, but we forget what happens in the future. Versus if you just let the kids develop to their own milestones, they will be a lot more straighter, they're going to injure themselves a lot less in the future, and they can grow in a much more successful way going forward. The most important thing that this way of letting kids be kids, giving them their space to grow and develop themselves, is that they learn to learn themselves, and they learn to do things because it's internally satisfying. They're not sitting up, they're not starting to walk, they're not trying to hit these milestones to please someone else, to please their parents, to please some artificial curve that exists out there based on some global average data. They're doing it because it's inherently interesting to them. And if we can give our kids that interest, if we can create that spark in them at this age, imagine the kind of implications that's going to have over our lifetime. If they can learn to sit up themselves, they have learned how to learn a skill like that as infants versus us having to push, pull, exercise them to hit that milestone. And so we need to relax a lot more and trust our kids. So if you're a new parent, the only thing I'll say is that just relax. In future videos, I'm going to talk a lot more about respectful parenting because I think it's a paradigm that we need a lot more of. It helps us see our kids as individuals and it puts the relationship between us and them at the very heart of things. So I'm really hopeful about what it means. I already know from reading about it and practicing even a small sliver of it that it's completely changed the way that I parent, even with a 6-month-old. I can't wait to see what it does for me as my kid continues to grow up. Leave a comment below about what it's been like for you to raise a kid or even be raised yourself when you're constantly being compared to other people. I'd love to hear your story. And if you have a story that you'd like me to cover, a concept that you'd like me to cover in more detail, please leave that in the comment below as well. Thanks a lot.